Hello, bookworms, to Timber's Den. My name is Whitney, and we are reading Obsidian Butterfly by Laurell K. Hamilton. So, really excited to discuss this one. Excuse Boo Boo here, making a wreck with Clifford, new member of the Stuffy collection here. But yeah, really just enjoyed this first half of the book. It was a lot of fun because I was able to discuss it with my husband. Obviously, I picked this book, based on him. And so it was fun to kind of discuss it with him. And he's actually read, the majority of the series. He doesn't know if there's any new ones since the last time he got a book. I'm sure there probably is. But he, it kind of gave me some spoilers, which is fine. I don't mind that. And we were able to kind of discuss it a little bit, which was a lot of fun. Before we get into the discussion questions on this one, though, just a reminder, we also do a Throwback Thursday here where we cover different children's books, my current childhood favorites, and then eventually it's going to kind of turn into more of a kids' corner and such. And then we also do a series Saturday. We're currently working our way through the Dresden Files. We just finished up Summer Night this past Saturday and started Death Mass. So if you want to participate in that, you can find links for the whole series, well, at least the ones up till this point, down in the description below. And then we also do a weekly read every Wednesday. This week we are finishing up The Morning After by Lisa Jackson. You can find my thoughts on this Wednesday. And then this Wednesday we are going to be starting Pure Joy by Danielle Steele. So really excited to do this, and then you'll find my thoughts on this next Wednesday. But excited for that one. And then as always, I like to introduce the next Wednesday's book, so that way if you want to get a copy, you have a week and some change to do so. And we are going to be reading Brian Jacques, The Angel's Command. So really excited. My husband has a bunch of Brian Jacques books. Most of them are the Redwall series, which I've read one, I think, and really enjoyed it. So we're gonna eventually be doing those ones for our series Saturday. But right now, this is the only standalone type book he had that wasn't part of that series. So I decided, since we're reading Obsidian Butterfly in honor of him, I wanted to try to do a weekly read that went along with that. So let's see if there is a synopsis. There's not one on the back. It looks like there's a little bit right here. But other than that, not really. Let's go ahead and just read this little part right here for you guys. It says, Ben and his black Labrador, castaways from the legendary ghost ship Flying Dutchman, swore never to go to sea again, but fate cast them adrift once more on a French pirate ship with two villainous sea captains and a ghost in pursuit. This jam-packed adventure is a swashbuckling tale of pirates on the high seas. It has all the elements that make Jacques's books sing: terrific description, wonderful characters, and the power to transport you to an unforgettable place. That's from the Detroit Free Press. And so, yeah, really excited for that one. I like pirates, so we'll see. But I did enjoy the Brian Jacques book I read, and so I'm really excited for this one. And plus, I love my Labradors. You've seen them pop up in the videos, so really excited to jump into this one next Wednesday. But yeah, excited for that. Let's go ahead and get into our discussion questions for Obsidian Butterfly. So there are 16 chapters we're reading each week. So I just, again, did one question for each chapter. And then we're going to kind of do that going forward. But the first question is, Anita comes home after a night of raising zombies. What moral and ethical implications are there in raising the dead to take care of unfinished business? And I can think, it would get very, very complicated. One, do the dead want to be raised? Because I know I wouldn't. Like, if I'm dead, like, let me lay, let me rest. I'm done with life. Like, I don't want to come back. And so I think that could kind of get complicated. Or on the other hand, what about the zombies that don't want to, go back? You raise them, do they stay raised or do they have to go back, and what if they fight that? And then plus, like, is there a statute on limitations on how often you can raise a zombie or how long you can do to, deal with human life squabbles? Like, if there's a question on an estate or something, like how long can you drag that out? And she brought it up, the question of the zombie being of sound mind to, sign the contracts and such. So I could just see it getting kind of very messy if you could just raise the dead, to handle unfinished business and such. Like, I could see it kind of getting very complicated very quickly. Um, I said, and I don't think it's necessarily a good thing either, especially what if they want to stay dead and stay at peace, and how that whole thing works. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know, but I don't think it's necessarily a good thing. I think it could get very, very complicated, and I kind of thought it was interesting, that whole take on it in the beginning of the chapter sets, but yeah. And number two, with all Anita knows of him, why is Edward's alter ego, Ted, playing house the thing that upsets her the most? And I think, just based on what we know of Edward on this book, obviously this is the ninth in the series, and there's a lot more to the previous books where you could probably get a better idea of Edward, but just reading this book alone by itself and getting that picture of Edward, I think, based on her descriptions and such, he's obviously very dark and very dangerous, but that energy was always projected, you know, at people slash things that deserved it. They were kind of evil in their own right. Where now he's kind of taking advantage of an innocent family. And yes, it's not in the same way, as far as what he normally does, but at the same time, he is putting them at danger and he's lying to them. And he's kind of preying on that innocence in a sense. And so I think that's really what shocks her. Like, she can understand the other stuff, but this is just too far and she can't understand it or agree with it or anything like that. And three, according to Edward, walking out would cause the most damage and he can't tell the truth. Is continuing the facade the kindest thing he can do? And I'm not really sure if it is. I mean, we learned about more about the relationship, going forward in the set of chapters. But I think, it's definitely kind of a hairy situation, but he's in it now. And so I think, yes, he can't tell the truth. Two, just walking out would do a lot of damage, but I do think he can maybe find a way to kind of get out of it, while doing the least amount of damage. But either way, I think it's kind of a sticky situation. And staying and continuing the facade, though, there's a certain level of danger with what he does, and how much is that going to put them at danger. And four, Anita both fully trusts and doesn't trust Edward. How can both be possible? And I think, she fully trusts him because she knows his true nature and she kind of knows what to expect from him. Where, because she knows that, though, and she does know his true nature, she knows just how dangerous he is. So I think she can trust him based on what she knows, but then she knows how dangerous he is, and so she can't fully trust him because of that. So it's kind of like this weird dynamic between them for sure. And number five, Anita is an outsider, a woman, and an animator. Was how she handled herself effective? And I think it was. I think it definitely kind of earned the respect of some of the other, like police officers and the doctor and such. But at the same time, I think it almost made things worse for her with Lieutenant Marks. And so, while it was an effective way in one sense, I don't think it really worked for him. But honestly, I don't think anything she would have done would have worked for him. Like, he had this preconceived notion of her, and he just automatically dislikes her based on what he believes. And so I don't think anything she could have done would have worked anyway. And so I think, how she handled herself was an effective way, especially regarding like the rest of the people in the mix for sure. So, and number 6, after initially composing herself, Anita ends up having to leave the hospital room. Why didn't the horror of the situation cause her to leave right away? And the only thing I could think of was, in dog training we have this thing called trigger stacking. And basically it means, like, you have different things that will kind of set the dog off. And so, maybe one of those things by themselves, they can kind of keep themselves composed, but you add multiple levels and they kind of just go over threshold and react. And so that's kind of what made me think, like, that first, instance, like, yes, it was shocking and upsetting to her, but she was able to kind of compose herself and focus on the case. And then, something else was revealed and that was shocking and upsetting, and it kind of just raised the bar. And then that last thing was revealed and it just put her over the edge. And so it just kind of stacked up. It's kind of like the straw that broke the camel's back, or whatever that saying is. Same situation there. And 7, why does Anita keep pointing out the differences between her and Edward? And I think it's because they are a lot alike, and she does see that darkness in herself as well. And so she keeps pointing out the differences, kind of grasping that she's not as far gone, like, morally and ethically as he is. Or maybe, she hasn't fully lost her humanity like he has. Like, she's just grasping at that. And so she's almost reminding herself that she's different than him. Like, she's not the same. Yes, there's a lot of similarities, but she is not the same as him. And number 8, Lieutenant Mark strongly dislikes Anita. How can this hinder the investigation? And so we do see later he gets her kicked off, the case, and pulls her from the crime scene. But I think, that's one way he, even if she was able to stay on officially, he is going to block her. He's not going to give her all the information she needs. And he's going to kind of be a barrier in her way. And likewise, he's not going to necessarily listen to her and believe the things that she says. And so it's going to hinder the investigation on both those points for sure. And number 9, are there worse things in life than death? And I definitely think it is. So this is kind of referring to the conversation between Anita and Edward, and kind of what would happen if they ended up like the victims that were left alive. And I do think, there are things worse in life than death. I'm kind of in the mind, like, whether you believe that there is, life after death, you can go to heaven, or whether you believe there's just nothing. Um, I think, there's death is still a more welcome thing than certain things in life. Prolonged suffering being one of those. And I think the only reason to really fear death is, if you do believe in an afterlife and you think you're going to hell. Like, that's, in my mind, that's the only reason to really fear death. Like, I know it's a little more complicated than that, um and everything. So, but that's just my personal beliefs. And so, yeah, I do think that there's definitely worse things in life than death for sure. So number 10, Anita is trying to separate herself from the victims. Will this help the case? And I do think in some ways it does help the case, because you kind of need to maintain that objectivity. But at the same time, you do need to have a certain connection to the victims, I think, to be fully invested. So I think there's kind of this fine line, between being invested in your victims and, having that connection to them, and then also maintaining that objectivity. It's kind of a hard balance, and I can relate to that too. Working in the vet clinic, especially with like euthanasias and such, like, it would be really hard to kind of maintain that, because you really connected and felt for the owners and such, and you had these connections with the animals, but at the same time you kind of need to be objective, so that way it didn't really just totally get to you and you know mess you up for sure. So, and number 11, Anita wonders what it would be like to date a normal slash human man. With what we know, would a relationship like this work? And I doubt it. Honestly, I don't think she would be happy in a relationship with like that. She would kind of have to hold herself back. And with the men that she didn't necessarily have to hold herself back, they could, put themselves in danger. It kind of made me think of both Buffy and Supernatural, both shows I really enjoyed watching. And I remember, like, in Buffy, there was the one episode where she was over it. Like, she just wanted to be a normal teenager, go out on a date with a guy, and it kind of ends badly and he gets hurt. But he kind of thinks it's a rush and is all for it. And so she just kind of has to shut that down because he doesn't understand the stakes. And then in Supernatural, we see that they try to have relationships, but then they always get pulled in, and there's a danger to them. And so they're just not able to have those successful, normal relationships. And I think it's kind of the same situation with Anita. Like, I don't see it working out for her. And number 12, Peter seems afraid of Ted slash Edward. If Anita is right, why can't he sense Edward's true nature? And I think it's because, one, he's kind of lost that childhood innocence. And with how he lost that, and then kind of his role in the family, he already doesn't trust Ted. And so I think he's kind of already distrustful. And because he's kind of distrustful and he's, kind of the protector of the family, he maybe sees underneath the facade that Ted slash Edward has. Excuse me, Boo Boo's driving me insane today. And so yeah, I think, it's kind of his role. And then he's also not female. And, with his sister, Becca, she's young. And so she kind of has that childhood innocence and just trust. And then his mom, obviously Ted is able to charm her, where he's not able to use that charm on Peter at all. So 13, the family is threatened. Why did Edward let Anita handle the situation? And I think he kind of had to be careful. I think, he still had to play Ted. When he handled the other two, it was they weren't right there watching him, so he could kind of go full out. Where now he kind of had to balance that fine line between Edward and Ted, and between I'm tough but I'm still Ted, and so I'm not gonna fully resort to violence here. Where Anita, she didn't have that problem. She wasn't playing. She is who she is. And then also, I think it helped with the police and everything and the witnesses, because here she is, this woman that doesn't look all that threatening. And, she kicked butt and defended herself. And so it helped with the witnesses and everything, that it was a woman versus a man defending herself against a man versus, Edward and a man. It could have kind of got sticky. So I think that's why he kind of let Anita handle it. And 14, was Anita too harsh or was Donna due for a wake up call? And honestly, Donna was getting on my nerves, and so I do think she was definitely due for a wake up call. And I don't think Anita was too harsh at all. Like, yes, there's kind of that fine line between telling somebody how to parent their children, but honestly, she needed to step up. She was being absolutely ridiculous. I understand her reaction in the heat of the moment, but the aftermath, she was just making the little girl worse. Like, the little girl was just feeding off her mom, and she really needed to step up and do her job as a mother, not give in to hysterics. So, and let's see, 15, with as unsuitable as they appear, why are Donna and the kids the people Edward wishes he could be different for? I think they kind of represent this, like, innocence and goodness that he's never going to get back. Again, this is the ninth book in the series, and so we don't have all that backstory, but we still get a really good picture of him. And so I think they're this innocent and goodness that he can never get back. And so I think he does kind of wish it could be different, and he could be Ted for real, and fully be present with them. And then also, I think, he knows a little bit more about Donna's backstory and everything than obviously Anita does. And we're getting all this from Anita's viewpoint. And so I think there's also something more there that drew him in. Obviously it started with protecting her and her family, from these thugs. Um, but I think there's more to it, especially with how her ex died and everything, and with how Peter had to handle himself. So I think it draws him in, but that innocence and that goodness, he really wishes he could be, somebody that could have that for sure. And let's see, number 16, the last one. Anita is caught off guard. Is this a sign of how big whatever it is she senses could be? And I definitely think so. Now, there's kind of a little bit of Anita. One, she just kind of went for it, and wasn't fully prepared. And two, based on what we know, she's kind of learning more about her powers and opening herself up to that side of things. And so she's learning, one, and then two, she wasn't fully prepared, and it caught her off guard. But I think, knowing that it was a good distance out and she still sensed it just in passing, and then was able to, reach out and sense it more, and then that it could sense her, and then from that distance knock her out on her butt. Like, I think, that is like, this is something that's very, very powerful, and very, very big. And I think we do kind of see that in this scene that plays out right here. So but that's it for the discussion questions. Let me know your thoughts on those. And I'm really excited to read the next set. This week we are going to be reading chapters 17 through 32, and we will discuss that next Monday. I'm going to go ahead and leave you guys here. Happy reading, everyone. Bye.